Deep void listening satellite active. Signal intercepted. Origin, Mars. Relay Station 42B. Subject, psychological deterioration, unauthorized transmission, unidentified presence. Data classification, red level anomaly. Playback initialized.
I signed up for this job because nobody bothers you here. 6 months alone at Relay Station 42B, monitoring communications between Helios Colony and Earth. Just me, my thoughts, and the rusty red landscape of Mars stretching endlessly outside my reinforced windows. Perfect for someone like me. The station itself isn't much. A central hub with my living quarters and the main communications array, 3 outlying sensor buildings connected by pressurized tunnels, and a garage bay for the sand rovers. Everything built low against the Martian surface to withstand the dust storms. For the first 2 months, I found the silence comforting. I'd wake up, check the systems, eat my rations, make my hourly reports, and spend the rest of my time reading or watching old Earth shows I'd downloaded. The occasional dust storm would rattle the station, but otherwise, the only sounds were the hum of life support and my own breathing. Then I started hearing things. At first, I dismissed it as the station settling. Metal contracting in the cold Martian nights. Wind finding new ways to whistle through microscopic imperfections in the seals. But last week, I heard something different. A scratching sound, like fingernails on metal, coming from the North Tunnel. I checked the security feed. Nothing. I suited up and inspected the tunnel myself. Nothing. Just the usual red dust collecting in the corners. I increased my exercise routine, thinking perhaps cabin fever was setting in early. Started taking vitamin D supplements. Logged more frequent calls to the psychology team at Helios. It didn't help. 3 days ago, I was running a routine check on incoming signals when I caught something unusual, a transmission on an emergency frequency that shouldn't have been active. I adjusted the receiver, and that's when I heard it. "Mark, can you hear me? I'm still here, in the Black Sands. Come find me." My blood froze. The voice was barely above a whisper, distorted by static, but somehow familiar, like a voice I'd heard in a dream or a nightmare. The transmission origin coordinates pointed to inside the station, specifically the unused storage compartment at the end of the East Tunnel. I tried to report it, but the main communications array suddenly went offline. Just for 17 minutes, but long enough to make me question whether I'd imagined the whole thing. When systems came back online, there was no record of the transmission. Last night I couldn't sleep. The scratching had returned, louder now, more persistent, and something else. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like footsteps moving through the tunnels. I sealed my quarters and watched the security feeds all night. Nothing. This morning, I forced myself to investigate the storage compartment. The door was sealed, just as it had been since I arrived. The access panel showed no entry since the last maintenance check 6 months ago. I entered my override code with trembling fingers. The door hissed open. The compartment was empty, except for a small patch of black sand on the floor. Not the rust-red dust of Mars, but black, like volcanic glass, glittering under the harsh lights. I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. Black sand doesn't exist on Mars. Not naturally. I ran back to the communications hub and initiated an emergency protocol requesting immediate extraction. The system acknowledged, telling me a maintenance team was already en route, scheduled to arrive in 12 hours. That's when the lights flickered. On the main monitor, instead of the standard diagnostic readout, there was a strange pattern forming. Shapes that looked disturbingly like faces, mouths open in silent screams. "Mark, I'm coming to you now." The voice came from everywhere, the speakers, the ventilation system, even seeming to emanate from the walls themselves. I spun around, searching for the source. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, where the shadows seemed unnaturally deep, something was taking shape. A figure, tall and thin, draped in what looked like tattered black cloth that moved against the recycled air currents. Where its face should have been, there was only darkness, except for 2 pinpricks of light like distant stars. It raised what might have been an arm, pointing at me with an elongated finger. "You promised. You wouldn't leave me. Here." Then it screamed, a sound like metal tearing, like the vacuum of space itself being ripped apart. The noise crashed through my skull, driving me to my knees. Every monitor in the station exploded in a shower of sparks. The emergency lights flashed on and off, strobing the creature into fractured, nightmarish images. I ran. Through the central hub, down the west tunnel. Alarms blaring, red emergency lights casting everything in blood. Behind me, I could hear it, moving fast, a sound like wet cloth dragging across metal. I reached the garage bay, punching the emergency override on the airlock with enough force to crack the protective cover. The massive door began its slow, hydraulic opening. As the gap widened, light spilled in. The harsh, unfiltered sunlight of Mars, catching the swirling dust particles. And through that gap, I saw them. 4 suited figures approaching the station. The maintenance team arriving early. I collapsed to my knees as they rushed to me, their voices crackling through their helmet comms, asking if I was all right. I turned, pointing back into the station, trying to warn them about what was inside. But the tunnels behind me were empty. The emergency lights had stopped flashing. The alarms had gone silent. One of them, the team leader judging by her patches, helped me to my feet. "It's all right, Mark," she said, her voice gentle through the comm. "This happens sometimes. It's why we rotate personnel every 6 months. Mars gets to you after a while. The isolation, the silence. The human mind isn't built for it." They guided me to their sand rover, speaking in reassuring tones as they secured me in the passenger compartment. As we pulled away from the station, I looked back through the small viewport. For just a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the window of the communications hub, a tall, thin silhouette against the lights inside. Then it was gone, and there was only the stark, empty structure against the Martian landscape. As we drive across the dusty plain toward Helios Colony, I keep replaying everything in my mind. The voice on the receiver, the black sand, the figure in the shadows. Was it all in my head? A hallucination brought on by isolation and anxiety? I think that's what I'll tell the psych evaluation team. That's what they'll want to hear. But I can't stop thinking about that black sand. I've checked my suit 3 times now, brushing at the seams, examining the treads of my boots. Because I swear, each time I look, I find a few more grains of black sand. And sometimes, when the rover's engine quiets as we crest a dune, I think I can still hear that voice calling my name on the Martian wind.